Parshat Bamidbar, but a few things to talk about first. Number one, Shavuot. On a normal year, it doesn't really apply this year, but on a normal year, when women light candles on the Erev of a Yom Tov, what time do you light candles? Do you light candles before the Yom Tov begins?
Yeah.
Okay? The one exception is Shavuot. The halacha says on Shavuot, you should not light candles till after your husband comes back home from shul, from Beit Knesset. You light candles already when it's dark. You know why? Because Shavuot, there's no date in the Torah for Shavuot. It says from Pesach you count 49 days, and day 50 is Shavuot. So we have to wait till the 49th day comes to an end. And that only happens when the stars come out. Seta Kochavim.
No, possible.
Okay? So it's unusual that Sukkot you can light early. On Pesach we light early.
As a day.
As a day. But Shavuot, not. Now this year you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because Shavuot is Motzei Shabbat.
Anyway.
So you cannot strike a match on Shabbat. So you're going to have to wait till after Shabbat is over anyway. So this year it doesn't make a difference. But what it does help you is that if you get a good sleep Shabbat afternoon, you'll have the ability to stay up Shabbat night to learn.
Full night.
Right? So normally people come and they're exhausted from working the whole week. But here you have a Shabbat to rest up.
It's already this Saturday?
This Saturday night. Okay? So that's number one. Now, what do we learn Shavuot night? That means, even for women, some people stay up. But if you stay up, women stay up.
Каждый год я не сплю. Каждый год я сплю.
Women retailing.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what they can read, but it's interesting. That means even when I speak with Rabbi Nissanov or in Briarwood, there's a lot of women that attend.
Yes.
You know, they attend shiurim. So there's something called Tikkun Leil Shavuot. The Tikkun is little sections of Chumash, every Parsha, Novi, all Torah Shebichtav.
So they're obligated or it's just...
So some people...
Where I learned, boys,
Right.
Ruben Molojanov, he told 3 pasukim from beginning,
That's
3
right.
pasukim last.
Correct.
And it's meaning you finish all parasha. And every full night you need to finish full Torah.
So that's very interesting, because in the yeshivas they learn Gemara, but there are many people, Rabbanim, who say no. Shavuot night we don't learn Torah Shebaal Peh, which is Gemara, because what do we get on Shavuot? The written Torah. So we only learn the written Torah. Just like on Pesach. You're sitting at the Seder, you're getting bored. So you pull out, you say, you know what, I'm going to do Daf Yomi. You know what you say to the boy? No, not tonight. Tonight there's only one subject, one topic. Pesach.
Yes.
Yetziat Mitzrayim. That's the topic, nothing else. On Shavuot, some people say, what's the topic? Only one topic. Torah Shebichtav. Chumash, Navi, that's it. You want to learn Megillat Ruth maybe, you know, that's it. No Mishnah, no Gemara, no Rishonim, no Shulchan Aruch, nothing else. Now other people disagree. Other people say, when it comes to learning, you learn what you enjoy. So if a person says, I really enjoy this particular book, even though it's written later, it's Torah Shebaal Peh, so we do it. So everybody has a different opinion, but that's generally what it is. Now the truth is, when you stay up all night, your learning is not quality. If you think about it, if a person would have gone to sleep Saturday night, let's say 1 o'clock in the morning, and then daven shacharit normally at 9 o'clock, and learn all Sunday afternoon, their learning would be much better than trying to learn at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, drinking Coke or drinking coffee to try to stay up. So the purpose of staying up has nothing to do with the quality of learning. Why do we stay up?
Sleep.
So one opinion is that when the Torah was given, the Jews fell asleep. So we stay up as a way of showing kapara.
Yes.
We stay up because they fell asleep.
And we do tikkun.
Right, tikkun. But there's another tikkun that people don't realize. When they got the Torah, then Moshe went up 40 days and 40 nights to bring down the luchot. What greeted him? The Chet Egel, the golden calf. When the golden calf came, it reset the world back to the days when Adam and Chava made their sin, so now death came back into the world. There's an opinion that sleep is 1/60th of death.
Yes.
So therefore, since the Chet Egel brought death back into the world, we stay up and don't sleep, so we shouldn't taste even 1/60th of death. So that's why we stay up, as best we can.
Yes.
Not everybody's able to do it. That's why they organize shiurim. Do you have shiurim here? Do people come and talk?
learn and talk,
Men
everything.
have, but women, we go like 108.
108?
Or different places.
To Bet Gavriel, they have
Yeah.
shiurim. And it's hard. When someone is speaking and you're listening and you're not involved, it's very hard. It's easy to fall asleep. But listen, I try to keep them. I have stories for them. I have a lot of things that I'm going to talk about. But some of the things that we spoke about
Maybe you
here.
should come to you.
I should come here, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
we get go to.
It's hard enough walking from Kew Gardens to Briarwood, and then I go to Hillcrest, then I go to Kew Garden Hills. Then after I'm done at 4
Oh,
o'clock,
and nothing to, you can do the driving, nothing.
nothing.
Uh-huh.
So I leave my house around 10:30, so now it's 4 o'clock, so I've been on my feet for 6 hours, and I'm not walking like I used to. Then at 4 o'clock, I gotta walk back home, I wanna make shacharit. That 4 o'clock to 4:30, 4:45 walk home, that's the hardest. Because there already, it's the end of the day, end of the night. That, Hashem, when I do it, it's like,
How far is you going, your shul? You going to shul?
yeah, well, the shul's not far from me. I go to the yeshiva because it's closer. But it's still, it's a 45-minute hour walk. I'm exhausted. And it's interesting. But okay, we get it done. We get it done. Okay.
You can't use the phones, right, on Shavuot?
No, it's like a chag. The Shavuot is no different than a Shabbat. The only difference is you can cook and you can carry. But otherwise,
can
all the
carry?
restrictions.
You
You can
may.
carry.
Okay, we
You
can.
can carry and you can cook.
But we can cook.
You
Можешь
can.
носить и можешь готовить.
But you can't lie. Right, you can cook. Right, you can cook and prepare. Right. One of the things, for example, I talk about at Shavuot, it's interesting, we talk about, it's Ezra HaSofer, he made a rule, Ezra HaSofer made a rule that before Shavuot, we always read the Parshat Bechukotai. Bechukotai is the Tochacha, all the horrible things will happen if you don't keep the Torah. And we always read that before Shavuot, so we should know, these are the consequences. Here is the Torah. So it's interesting. The Gemara says, first of all, the Gemara says that when the other nations of the world came and complained, how come you don't give us the Torah? So Hashem says, well, show me your lineage, your yichus. Who's your father? Who's your grandfather? Who's your great-grandfather? The Jews come from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Who do you come from? The truth is, that's really a misdirection. Because it makes no difference who your father is or grandfather. If you want to learn Torah, you should be able to learn Torah. So they explain, no, this is not what Hashem said to them. Hashem said to them that was very interesting. When I went to the Jews and I offered them the Torah, and I went to the nations and I offered them the Torah, they responded differently. The nations of the world said, well, what's written in this Torah of yours? Let's go, you're telling me, do you want to accept the Torah? I want to read it first. I don't sign something without reading it. The Jews, they were prepared to sign, Na'aseh v'nishma. So the nation said, I don't get it. Why were the Jews so willing to do that? That seems silly. If I give you a piece of paper and say, sign it, don't read it, you're not going to do it. So why were they so quick? Why was Bnei Yisrael so quick to say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do it, before we hear it? So the answer, because it was food, maybe. So the answer is that when Hashem offered them the Torah, you know what the Bnei Yisrael says? Oh yeah, we know all about that. We've been keeping the Torah for years already. Oh, Shabbat, we know about Shabbat. We kept Shabbat in Mitzrayim. So what do you know about all that? Well, Avraham kept the Torah, and Yitzchak kept the Torah, and Yaakov kept the Torah, and the Shvatim kept the Torah. So the truth is, when Hashem came to the Jewish people and says, here, I have something called the Torah, they said, yeah, we know that. We know those mitzvahs. Oh, yeah, it's tefillin, we know that. Tzitzit, we know all about that. So, of course, they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. The other nations, so that's what Hashem says, show me your lineage. What claim you have to the Torah. The truth is, the Jewish people have been keeping the Torah for hundreds of years, even before it was given. Because it was a tradition. They get things from there. There are a lot of things we do.
So they used to have,
They had something like that
like that.
from their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents. We have a lot of traditions that come from family. You know that. They just saw in your family, you saw it growing up. So when the Jewish people accepted the Torah, it was an amazing, amazing thing. But it wasn't so amazing because Hashem says, well, look at who their parents are. Look at who their grandparents are. They've been used to this all along. We talk about this, that, when they had I was at a graduation in Darchei Torah this week on Sunday, graduation. It was for my grandson who's 5. It was a siddur party. They make a big party because he got a siddur. So Rabbi Bender was speaking. Rabbi Bender is the Rosh Hashiva. Rabbi Bender is a very accomplished educator. And he spoke and he says, look around you. And we looked all around. He says, most children here have 2 sets of grandparents. That means not only are their father and mothers here, but their grandparents are here, and sometimes even their great-grandparents.
Yes,
He says, when I graduated, and I had a class of 30 boys, between all 30, there was maybe 10 grandparents in the room, because it was 1950. Where were all the grandparents? They all died in the Holocaust. When I grew up, my father's side, I had nobody. My father's whole family was lost. My mother, I had grandparents who were European, very European. They spoke German because they came from Austria, and it was hard to understand them. But we never had the connection. So my generation grew up without grandparents. Many of the Ashkenazim grew up without grandparents. Our children, now my children and my grandchildren, grow up with numerous grandparents. It's a very different upbringing, very different. Because we have a job. Our job is to spoil our grandchildren.
Yes.
And we do it well. That's what we do. We do it well. We take them out. We take them out on Chol HaMoed. I mean, the 50s was a very difficult time for kids growing up. And we know what happened in the 60s. It was total revolution. But there was something missing in what we call the Mesorah, the transmission. You know what that was? Grandparents. Grandparents were missing. So when I'm speaking on Shavuos night, we're talking about the concept of that before Shavuot, read B'chuk Kosai. After we read B'chuk Kosai, you know what we read? There's a whole section of the value of people. If you donate the value of a person, it's worth 50 shekel, 30 shekel. Then we get to Parshat Bamidbar, we're counting everybody. Everybody from the ages of 20 to 60. This week's Parshat Hapikudim, we're numbers, we're counting 600,000 Jews. So what was the difference? 1 minute we're talking about what happens if you don't listen to the Torah and terrible things can happen. Now we're counting everybody. So there's a message here. The message is everybody is important. Everybody equals the census. You count what's important to you. You don't count the things that are not important. People count their money because their money is important to them. People count what they own because what they own is very important. When you count people, you're giving a message. You know the message is every Jew is important. And I mentioned to you this a few months ago from Rabbi Orlovsky. Rabbi Orlovsky had a very interesting observation, Rabbi David Orlovsky. He says in the 1950s and 1960s, no yeshiva ever threw out a kid. You could break the front window of the yeshiva, and the head of the yeshiva would say to you, tomorrow bring $10 to pay for the window, but I expect to see you in class tomorrow. Today, if a kid looks at the teacher funny, that's it, get out of here, we don't want you, throw you out. What's the difference? He says in 1950, every kid was important. No yeshiva could afford to lose a child. Today, you know what the yeshiva's attitude is? This is your chair? I have 15 people who want that chair. So if you don't do what I tell you, you're out. I'll fill that chair tomorrow with somebody else. He says the attitude has changed. 30, 40, 50 years ago, every single child was precious, was special. There were no bad children. There were no children that got expelled. We always worked as hard as we could to save every child. Today, everybody's expendable. Okay? And that's the problem. That's the problem. It's okay. In a Torah, how many letters are there in a Torah? So there's 600,000 letters in the Torah. Actually, there's 304,000, but many letters are a combination of two letters. So there's 600,000. So the Gemara says, why 600,000? There's a letter in the Torah for every single Jew that left Egypt. For every neshama. Very interesting. There's 600,000 neshamot in the world. We all have parts of those neshamot. And the Sefer Torah has 600,000 words, letters, because every letter represents another Jew, one of the neshamot. Okay. Now, according to the Torah, when you write a Sefer Torah, can two letters be touching each other? No. So every letter has parchment all around it. Okay? 600,000 letters, one for every neshama that Hashem created in the world. That makes up a Sefer Torah. Now think about this. Let's say one letter, I don't like that letter, he's not behaving himself. I'm going to throw him out. Okay, so I take that letter and I erase it. I throw it out. Is that Sefer Torah kosher? Pasul. Think about that when you run a school. Or you don't like this neshama, this kid. His neshama you don't like. So you're going to throw him out. No problem. But by doing that, what have you done? You made the Sefer Torah pasul. So it's interesting. We lead up to Shavuot. We talk about consequences. Then the Torah stops and says, okay, I'm going to count everybody. 600,000 of you, I'm going to count you. You're important. And then I'm going to write a Torah that you're going to accept on Shavuot that has 600,000 letters. And I'm going to send you a message. If it's missing one letter, the Torah is pasul. What are we supposed to learn from that? You learn from that everybody is important. Nobody is expendable. Nobody should walk out on somebody and say, I give up on that. He's gone. I remember in school, there were many kids who were difficult. And my teachers were mostly Ashkenazim, and they had no clue about Russian mentality or culture, let alone the Bukharian, let alone Sephardi culture. How could they? We had no exposure, we had no training in that. You know, we wouldn't know that. So teachers would send me kids all the time, and they would say to me, that kid has to be thrown out. I used to get ultimatums. It's either the kid or me, make a choice. Either you're going to find a new teacher tomorrow, or you get rid of the kid. And teachers got very angry when I didn't back the teacher, when I protected the child. So I tried to explain to them that you're looking at the child today, but in 10 years from now, this child is going to be a wonderful kid, having a job, probably making $1 million, probably buying 3 houses, and you're not going to recognize him. Don't give up on him. Don't give up. He's had a bad day. I'll deal with that. I'll deal with it. There'll be consequences for his behavior. I'll deal with it. But don't give up on the kid. Don't. Throwing him out into the street is not going to make him a better kid. Sending him to public school is not going to make him a better Jew. Okay? But they didn't want to hear it. It was we used to run into this problem all the time. But in the end, I look back at all the students that I had 20 or 30 years ago, and half of them wear sheitalach and send their kids to yeshivas, the vast majority. It's an amazing when you don't give up, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So that's what Shavuos is all about. Now, which Shevet was the biggest Shevet? Shevet Dan, Yehuda, these were the big Shvatim. What Shevet was the smallest Shevet? No, Binyamin was fairly large. What Shevet was half the size of the other? No, if most Shvatim were 40, 50, 60,000,
Joseph?
this Sheva, bless you, was only 22,000. It was like a third the size of everybody else. So you've given listen, you have 12 guesses. You've already used 5 or 6. This is not good. What?
Maybe.
Levi was the smallest Shevet. Why was Levi the smallest?
Because they don't have.
Wally or quantity.
What?
Wally or quantity.
Well, number one opinion is they had a dangerous profession. They used to carry the Aron. And if they didn't carry it the right way, some of them died. They don't really like that answer that much. But you know what? The Shvatim had a bracha. In Egypt, the more Paro made slaves out of them, the more they produced. What Shevet were not enslaved? Levi. So they didn't produce. Because Hashem didn't give them the bracha of having 6 children at one time. They had 1 child at a time. Aaron was born, then Miriam was born, or Miriam, then Aaron, then Moshe. They had 1 child at a time. They didn't have 6 at one time. So it comes out that as the Shvatim grew, the other Shvatim grew to 50, 60, 70,000 people. Shevet Levi had 22,000. They were the smallest. They weren't slaves, they weren't whipped, they weren't beaten. But they didn't have the bracha that Hashem gave. So Shevet Levi, had that restriction a little bit. When we read in Shavuot, we read the 10 Commandments, the Aseres HaDibros. So you know that if you ever read a Torah, there are notes. So on the Aseres HaDibros, there's the upper notes and there's the bottom notes. All year round, we read the bottom notes, which puts them into psukim, sections. When you read the upper notes, there's only 10 sections. That means even though Shabbat is 4 or 5 psukim, it's like one big pasuk. So the Vilna Gaon, he's of the opinion that when we read these 10 commandments in Parshat Yisro, which is in January, on Moaz Chanan, we read the bottom notes. And we break it up in psukim. Only on Shavuos night, we read the upper notes. 10 sections, 10 psukim, 10 commandments. The Rambam and other people disagree, and they read it all the time. But the Rambam is very interesting. In an Ashkenazi shul, when they read the 10 Commandments, what do most people do during the reading of the 10 Commandments? They stand up. According to the Rambam, you don't stand up. But there are opinions that the Rambam says you don't stand up in Parshat Yisro. You don't stand up in Parshat V'aschanan. But on Shavuos night or Shavuos morning, when we read the 10 Commandments, it's like accepting the Torah all over again. Then you're supposed to stand up. So there are many Sephardi shuls that they don't stand up for reading the 10 Commandments. But on Shavuot, they do. Okay? Now remember, you have 2 days Yom Tov. So the first day, we read a lot of different things we add on. The second day, we do Yizkor, and we do Megillat Ruth. In Israel, Shavuot is only 1 day.
Yeah, 1 day.
So now 1 day, they're doing Yizkor, they're doing Megillat Ruth, they're doing Avdamos. The 2-day Machzor is all done on 1 day. And they've been up all night. So it's a long night. Is there an idea that you stay up all night Saturday night, then you sleep Sunday, you stay up Sunday night as well, because it's the second day Yom Tov. Do people stay up the second day? Yes.
Everybody doing 1
No.
day in Israel?
I never heard.
Everybody does 1 day, unless you're an American,
No, but my son, he said he's gonna do for 2 days.
because he's not committed to living in Israel for the rest of his life.
Oh.
So he asked the question. Some people say he keeps 1 day, so he got someone that told him keep 2 days.
Okay.
It's not so easy finding a Yom Tov minyan the second day in Israel. You're going to shul the second day in Israel, everybody's driving the car and going to work. Okay, so it's not so easy.
Also, Pesach not so easy to do in Israel. If
That's
you live
correct.
in America, go on Pesach time to Israel, or
Yeah, and the last day Pesach, you're still keeping Pesach, and they're having falafel and challah and everything
Yeah.
else.
I got it.
They're having chometz in the house, and you're trying to keep Pesach. What's going on over here? Not so easy.
I didn't get the top part and bottom part. You said, what is it?
There's in the Chumash, there's called trup, the music notes, the notes how to read.
You
In
mean
the squiggles,
Signs,
the
something
signs.
like this, uh-huh.
So on
How
the,
many is like the dark bottom one? It's just lines, no?
they're lines, but they're different sounds. They make different
Oh,
music.
sound, you mean, yeah.
Right. So, and one of them is called Sof Pasuk, the end of the Pasuk. So in the Chumash, the 10 Commandments could have 30 psukim. But on Shavuot, when we read the 10 Commandments, we break it up into only 10 psukim. That means we don't have stops. We read Shabbat as one big pasuk. Normally it's 4 or 5 psukim. It's one big pasuk. There are no stops. It's called Tam Elyon, the upper notes, versus the the lower notes. So normally we read the lower notes. On Shavuot, we read the upper notes. So that's the difference. So, but that's very, very interesting. There was a story that a young man went to his Rebbe, a Hasidic Rebbe, and he said, Rebbe, when Mashiach comes, how will I know it's Mashiach? How will I recognize Mashiach? Good question, right? So the Rebbe says, don't worry. My only question is, how will Mashiach recognize you? Now, there are many Jews out there that you can't even recognize that they're Jewish. He says, I'm not worried about you recognizing Mashiach. Know what I'm worried about? Will Mashiach be able to recognize you? That means, what kind of a Jew will you be? Will Mashiach say, you're not Jewish? Or will he recognize you and say, oh yeah, you're Jewish? You know, that's the question that he says, that's my question I have. You know, will Mashiach recognize you? Versus, will you recognize Mashiach? Okay. When Hashem told Moshe to count the Jewish people, you know, initially Moshe was very hesitant. Moshe says, why are we counting them? Hashem says, well, I'm going to set up a camp. And we're going to have the Mishkan in the middle. And we're going to have 3 tribes on each side. 3, 3, 3, 3, 12 tribes. The one tribe that didn't have a spot was Levi. Levi was by the Mishkan. So Moshe says, oh, that's a terrible idea. Because people are going to get jealous. Who's on the east side? Who's on the west side? Who's the closest? You know, people are going to get jealous. How are we going to decide that? So Hashem says, no problem. The way they carried Yaakov's coffin, the brothers surrounded the coffin and they marched. That's how we're going to set it up. Nobody will complain because Yaakov's coffin was holy. Of course, who didn't carry the coffin was Yosef. Yosef was not allowed to carry the coffin because he was a king. But Ephraim and Manasseh was written, so they're separate. So Moshe said, but they'll be so jealous of each other. They're all going to have flags. They're going to say, I want to be part of Yehuda, I don't want to be part of Reuven. So Hashem says, you're only jealous if you're trying to get closer to a central source. The Mishkan is going to be in the middle. No matter where you are, if you're from Yehuda or Reuven or Ephraim or Zvulun, you're going to be equidistant from the Mishkan. No one is going to be closer and no one is going to be farther. And it gets to the idea that everybody thinks a particular place gives you kavod. And the Gemara says, Ein ha-mokum mechabed es odom. The place doesn't give you honor. People give you honor. You don't have to sit in a big chair to be respected. You can sit in the biggest chair in the world and have no respect. You know, it doesn't depend on the chair you're sitting in, right? It doesn't depend on the title you have. It depends on the person you are, okay? I know those are touchy subjects in our Jewish community these days, but it's not the title that gives you the respect. It's the person who respects the position. It's interesting that when Moshe counted the Jewish people, so he went from door to door, household to household, knocked on the door, they let him in, and he counted how many people were in the house. When he came to count Shevet Levi, he didn't go into the house.
Yeah.
He stood outside, and either the father of the house came out and said there's 5 people in the house, or he got nevuah that there's so many people in the house. Why? Very interesting. When he counted the Jewish people, he counted them from ages 20 and above. So he didn't mind knocking on the door. They were all adults. But for Shevet Levi, how old were they when they were counted? 1 month, 30 days. So to go into a house where a newborn baby was, usually the mother is there taking care of the newborn baby, the mother is nursing the baby, diapering the baby. It wasn't where Moshe didn't want to be there. It wasn't so when it was to count adults, Moshe knocked on the door, can I come in, can I count the adults? When it was to count the babies, Moshe stood on the outside.
Why?
He says, let the Father come in and tell us. Yes?
Rabbi, why I heard one time, but we're not supposed to count people.
The general rule is,
Yeah.
we don't count people, because when you count people, it creates an ayin hara,
Yeah.
okay? So we don't count. As a matter of fact, they say bracha is found on things hidden. They tell you, don't count the money in your pocket. Maybe Hashem will add an extra 20. But if you know you have only $40, to add an extra 20 would be such a miracle that Hashem doesn't do it that way. So if you want an extra 20 in your pocketbook, don't count your money in the first place. That's the general rule of
Even Goyish people who lives next to us, some men bring money from, and he told, I never count my money. It's, I don't know how much I count, I do today, how much I spend.
They don't count it.
That's what Goyim, he doesn't
There are
know.
people, if you ask them how many grandchildren they have, they'll tell you, I have many.
But you can't say that.
They won't tell you how many they have. They won't say I have 14 or 15 or 13. A lot of people often ask me how many grandchildren. I know people, I know grandmothers who, if you ask them how many grandchildren they have, they say, I have many grandchildren. How many? I don't count them. Because they don't want, again, not that we're so concerned about ayin hara. Some people are, some people aren't, but that's a general rule. Bracha is found on things that are hidden. So we keep things hidden, that's where bracha is found. So yes, there's a story in Tanakh where David HaMelech counted the Jewish people, not sure why, but he counted them and he wasn't supposed to count them. And there was a magefa, there was a plague, 70,000 Jews died. So they bring down a lot where, they're not supposed to count. They're not supposed to count. In this week's Parsha, there's a pasuk that says, "V'hazor hakorav yumos," a non-Kohen who does the avoda, the work in the Beit Hamikdash, is punishable by death. So the Gemara brings down a story that there was this non-Jewish person. He came to Shammai. He said, "I want to convert to Judaism." Shammai says, "Very nice, but I have one condition." What's your condition? After I convert, I want to be appointed the Kohen Gadol. Not bad, right? I'll convert, but I want to be the Kohen Gadol. What did Shammai say? Get out of here! I don't have no time for you. Then he went to Hillel. Hillel was a little bit more calm. And Hillel says, okay, let's go learn and let's see where it takes us. And they're learning the Chumash and everything else, and it comes to this pasuk, V'hazor hakorav yumos, a non-Kohen who does the avodah dies. So this non-Jewish person who's learning, who wants to convert, he says, if I convert to Judaism and I do the avodah, will I die? He says, yeah. He says, anybody? He says, even David HaMelech. Even though King David ate from the lechem hapanim, and even though he was anointed with the oil that the Beit HaMikdash was anointed, if King David did the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash, he would die. The minute he heard, even David HaMelech, even King David, he says, okay, I'll convert without them. So they want to know why Hillel used as an example King David. And the answer is because King David came, his great-grandmother was not Jewish, was Ruth. So he says, you see, even David HaMelech, he converted, or his family converted. He made it as high as king of Israel. He could do things no one could do. He was allowed to sit in the Beit HaMikdash. No one was allowed to sit. They didn't have chairs in the Beit HaMikdash. But for the king could sit. So he could do a lot of things no one else could do. Yet, he never brought a korban. He never was the Kohen Gadol. He didn't even do the work of a Kohen. So he says, you can convert, maybe one day you'll be king. So you won't be the Kohen. Is that the worst thing in the world? He says, no, it's not the worst thing in the world. So it's a famous Gemara how Hillel had a way of bringing people closer no matter what. He didn't allow people to be pushed away. So that was something that is quite interesting. The Nitziv, who was the Rosh Hashiva in Volozhin, the Nitziv, he says that they counted the Jewish people twice. They counted them in the beginning of Bamidbar, and those were 600,000 who left Egypt. Of those 600,000 who left Egypt, how many of them made it to Israel?
200.
Only the last 15,000. Everybody else died. The women lived. The older people lived. But the 600,000, after the sin of the spies, they all died. In Parshat Pinchas, we counted Jewish people again, around 600,000, 601,000. Big difference. The first 600,000 were those who left Egypt. They were the foundation of the Jewish people. The last 600,000, they were the ones who would go into Eretz Yisrael. So he says, the Netziv writes in his introduction to Parshas, to Sefer Bamidbar, he says the first 600,000 reflected the glory of Israel. Those who survived, like the Holocaust, those who survived the struggles. But as much as they survived, they were lost. They never got over the trauma. But at least they brought into the world the next 600,000. But that next 600,000 lived a different life. You see, the first 600,000 lived a life of miracles. They saw in Egypt 10 plagues that they never saw before. They had water, they had clouds from heaven, they had the man. They were literally learning for 40 years the Torah in a kollel where Hashem supplied them all their needs. Imagine, a person is learning in kollel. Very often they struggle, or the wife has to hold down 2 jobs because they can't pay the bills. Here Hashem comes like the father-in-law, I guess, or the mother-in-law, and he says, I'm going to pay all the bills. You sit and learn, and I'm going to cover all the costs. Okay? Doesn't happen very often. It's very hard to do that. So the first 600,000 for 40 years in the desert lived a unrealistic life, a life of miracle. The next 600,000 that were born, they had to go into Israel, and it was real. It doesn't get any more real. They had to fight wars. People died. They had to plow and plant and work hard, So it was very, very different than Netziv writes. The first 600,000 who left Egypt were children of miracles. The next 600,000 were children of reality. Very, very different. Rabbi Ginsburg, who was a Rav in Denver, he wrote the Sefer Yalkut Yehuda. He says something very interesting, a very strange medrash he brings down. He says there was a father whose son got engaged, so he made a big party for the engagement to usher in the wedding. During the party, the father says to his son, could you go downstairs to the wine cellar and bring up some more wine? The son says, sure. Goes down, and in the wine cellar there's a poisonous snake. The poisonous snake bites the son, and the son dies. His father's waiting for the wine, doesn't come back, goes down, and he sees his son has died. So when he comes up, he says to the people, we all got together thinking we were going to have a party, a wedding. Unfortunately, Hashem had different plans, and that wedding became now a funeral. At least we're all together, let's go bury my son, and they bury his son. So Rav Ginsburg writes, he says, I was writing my books, and I was thinking, I'm going to send my books, I'm going to print thousands of copies, and I'm going to send my books to Europe, because Europe has all the yeshivas, and I'm going to be able to send Torah from America to Europe. What happened came the Holocaust, and Europe was destroyed. So here I was so excited. I have all these books that I printed that I was going to send to Europe to show them, look, Torah from America, it can enrich Europe, and I have nowhere to send the books to. Yeah. I am stuck now having to accept the loss of thousands, millions of people, and I have to now stop looking to Europe for the Jewish future. I got to look to America and to Israel for the Jewish future. So he says, I feel like this father, who 1 minute I was going to be making a wedding, and now I'm making a funeral. That's what he wrote in his introduction, because he wrote this book in the 1940s, 1945, 1946. So he wrote, he says that, it was a shock. He brings down, it says that when Hashem made Yirmiyahu a Navi, so in the first parak of Yirmiyahu says, I'm a child. Hashem said to me, be a Navi, but I said to Hashem, I'm a little boy, how can I be a Navi? There are people older than me, smarter than me, wiser than me. Why would you take an 8-year-old and make him into a Navi? Hashem says, no, I want you to go. So he brings down Rabbi Ginsburg. He says, why did he do this? He says, because imagine what was going on in the minds of the Jewish people. The Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed. In the days of Yirmiyahu wrote Eicha. The Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed. Life in Israel had changed dramatically. The Babylonians came in, after that the Persians, everything was lost. So people gave up hope. If everything is lost, there's no future. So Hashem says, I'm going to send you a Navi. Who's the Navi? Not an old man who's 60 years old or 70 years old. A kid who's 8 years old. People said if Hashem can make an 8-year-old into a Navi, it means that we're not lost. Our children will rebuild. You know, you go to the old city Yerushalayim. There's, in the middle of the old city, in the Jewish quarter, there's something called the Kadro. You know what the Kadro is? They did excavations. They dug down in the foundation, and they found Roman pillars. So there's a whole area in the old city where you can walk along the side, and you can see down 10 or 15 feet where the city Yerushalayim was during the days of the Romans.
Yeah.
The Roman pillars. It's called the Kadro, C-A-D-R-O, the Kadro. Okay? So you walk there and you say, wow, you know, look at that, 2,000 years ago, when Rome was in Israel, this is what Israel looked like, the pillars, and you have mosaic tiles. You go a little further, there's a plaza, and they have stores all around the plaza, and they have seating and everything else. And right around there, that's where Parshat Yosef is, and Eish HaTorah, all the yeshivas. And they have this in the wall, in the brick wall, they have a pasuk from Zechariah, I think it is. And Zechariah writes that a day will come when grandfathers and grandmothers will sit and watch grandchildren play in the streets of Yerushalayim. And they wrote that in there. And you look at the contrast. You see the Roman occupation, and there you have the Churva shul, the shul that was destroyed by the Arabs. So on one side you have total destruction. And on this side you have all the stores, beautiful plaza, Parshat Yosef, Eish HaTorah, all the different Jewish quarter. And in the middle is a prophecy from Zechariah. Don't despair when you see the destruction of Israel or Jerusalem. Because I'm telling you, a day will come when you can sit and you look around you. After you read that, you look around and you see grandparents all around, older people, and you see children playing ball and everything else. Exactly what Zechariah wrote 2,000 years ago. You know, people ask, where do we have signs that show that Hashem hasn't rejected us? And these are the things we look for. These are the things, you know, that Hashem does. What Hashem does for us in order to show us that we don't reject. There are 2 Megillot named after women, Ruth and Esther. Let's compare these 2 women, Ruth and Esther. They're very, very different by their nature and their style. Let's just understand a little bit. Take Ruth, okay? Ruth was very quiet, very low-key. You know, she's not making a lot of noise. Her mother-in-law says, go back to your family. She says, no, I'm going to stick with you. She comes back with her mother-in-law. She doesn't open up a business in the store. She collects grains, you know, stalks of wheat, like all the other poor people, and she brings it home. She does nothing demonstrative. Everything she does is following her mother-in-law's instructions, and she stays her whole life low-key. Eventually she gets married. Eventually she has a child, and that child becomes David HaMelech. Esther, on the other hand, is a totally different personality. She's taken to the house of Achashverosh. She becomes the queen. She organizes Yom Tefillah and Tehillim. She fasts for 3 days. She sets up Haman. She gets rid of Haman. She has a child who allows the second Beis HaMikdash to be rebuilt. That means it is an amazing thing. 2 separate women, 2 totally different personalities, 2 totally different approaches, both highly successful in what they hope to accomplish. The Medrash says the Torah was given in the desert. You know why in the desert? because a desert is an undeveloped place. When you go into a desert, you know what the desert says? Change me, fix me, make me into something important. The Torah doesn't say, change me. The Torah says, I'm going to change you. The Jewish people were in the desert, and the Torah comes in and says, change me. They bring down, I saw Rabbi Beryl Wine talks about history. He says one of the first Reform temples was in the city of Krakow, which is in Poland. Now he says, fascinating. He says, if you would go into that shul, the Reform temple, everybody was Shomer Shabbat, everybody kept kosher, men and women sat separately. What made it a Reform temple? They did one change. Listen to this change. They said in the Beit HaMikdash, when they did the Avodah, the Levim played musical instruments. There was music. If our davening is our Avodah, after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, what replaced the sacrifices? Davening. So how come we don't have music? So they introduced music into their davening. They had instruments, a piano, an organ.
Like Christians, they do that.
Like Christians.
On Shabbos?
On Shabbos. But otherwise, davening was, everybody was Shomer Shabbos, everybody kept kosher, men and women sat separate, there was a mechitza.
The break Shabbat. Right?
That was the one change, that's how they began. And look how smart they were.
Logically. Logically, they want to tell you they are right.
Right. And I'll go, everything is packaging. You put a package together and it attracts your attention, you buy it. If you like the way it's packaged, you buy it. They didn't call the shul a shul or Beit Knesset. Temple. Like the Beit HaMikdash. What did the temple have that we didn't have? They had music.
Mm-hmm.
So we have music, we're a temple. We are like the Beit HaMikdash. So now a person says, where do you want to daven? Do you want to daven in the Beit Knesset? Or do you want to daven in the Beit HaMikdash? So people say, I want to daven in the Beit HaMikdash. And that's how it became known as the Reformed Temple. Now, the minute you start making a change, it doesn't end there. One change leads to another change, leads to another change, and before you know it, will Mashiach recognize you? That's the question. Not whether you'll recognize Mashiach. But it is amazing. It is amazing, what it is. We talk about, another 1 or 2 minutes, I'm going to talk about Shavuos night, the importance of people and how we talk. And I talked about, I told you a few months ago, that Rebbe sent his servant to the marketplace to find the most expensive object, and he brought back a piece of tongue. And then he says, I want you to buy the worst object in the world, and he brought back a piece of tongue. And he says that the tongue can be the most expensive and the worst. He can build a person up, or he can cut a person down. My brother-in-law tells a story. Listen to this. My brother-in-law tells a story that he flies a lot. He goes and he's flying all over the world. I just got on global entry. I was TSA because of my involvement. Now I have global entry. We'll see how much time that saves me. When you come to the airport, there's a special kiosk for global entry. So I was just approved for global entry. But he once traveled and he was exhausted, tired, and he survives on airline meals. He orders kosher meals, and most of the time the airline meals are, they're not the greatest. How could it be? Especially when you're flying to Israel. But if you don't eat the airline meals, you're going to go hungry. You're on the plane for 12 hours. And I often travel Motzei Shabbat, so the last meal I had was lunch. So by the time they serve the airline meal at 12 o'clock at night, I haven't eaten for 12 hours. So I eat mine, and my wife doesn't want to eat it. I eat hers. I'll eat both. So he says that one time he was traveling, and the airline meal was actually very good. It was good. It hit the spot. It really made him feel good. So he kept a little card, and when he got back to America, he sent a letter. I just want you to know that they served your meal, on this flight to Israel, and the meal was delicious. Now, the caterer calls him up He says, I've been doing this for 25 years.
No one.
No one ever sent me a letter. What? I never got a letter. Usually I get letters, your food was not edible, your food was horrible. How could you, what kind of a cook are you? You're not a cook, you're a butcher, get out of the kitchen. He said, there are many times I was this close to quitting because everybody abuses me. He says, you wrote me a letter. I can't believe it. My brother-in-law says that when he goes to a wedding and the food is good, he often goes into the kitchen and says to the caterer, that was a delicious meal, thank you. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. You go to a wedding, half the time you don't want to eat the food. And then when it's time to leave, because the wedding schleps and schleps and schleps, I'm not even talking about the Bukharian weddings that call it for 7, they don't start till 10. We're not going to talk about it. We're talking about the Ashkenazi weddings that start more or less on time. I have no time to stay for weddings. By the time I can get out of there, I get from the hall, I go straight to my car, and I drive out as fast as I can just to get on my way. Nobody goes to the caterer. No one ever thinks to say to the caterer, you just served 500 people. So if the food's not good, I got it. But if the food was really good, it was warm, it was tasty, that's not easy. My mother was a caterer. My mother survived in China, in Shanghai. They opened a small restaurant. And they served food during the day. Whatever was left over, that's what they ate themselves. And when my father passed away, my mother, once again, took catering on. And she slaved. She worked like a dog. It was very different in those days, 30 or 40 years ago. And schlepping the food back and forth and everything else. I know it's a very difficult job. And imagine, just saying
Someone says thank you. It's
30 seconds, 20 seconds. You're the guy, okay, I just want to let you know the food was delicious, thank you. I mean, after the guy has a heart attack and drops to the floor and they revive him, we are so quick to criticize and cut someone down. We have no idea the power of our words and what we can say and how it makes a difference. A person's going through a difficult time. You don't have the answers. Many times I don't have the answers for people who call me. But sometimes I just say to them, I'm really sorry you're going through this. Next time I daven, I'm going to have you in mind. And that makes all the difference in the world. Just, you don't have the answer for me. There's some problems in life, there are no answers. But just say, I'm so sorry you're going through this. The power of an individual. But today, everybody's expendable. But if you think about the fact that every Jew is a letter in the Torah, and the next time you try to write someone off, just remember that Torah without that letter is not kosher, it's pasul. So that's part of my speech for Shavuos night. So we'll see whether I can keep them up and keep them engaged, as we say. These are some of the things I'm going to be saying to them. It's interesting, we count 49 days. Sfirat Summer is 49 days. And in the Pirkei Avos it says, the nicest thing about a person is Leiv Tov, have a good heart. Leiv